Okay. So I'm not sure who got to join us for the other sessions. I know a few of you look very, very familiar, but we start with a one-word check-in. So I'm just going to invite us to drop into our bodies and notice how our bodies are feeling, and then acknowledge kind of the energy that your body is bringing into the shared space today. Okay. So Zoom is hard on our bodies, even though we've only been here a few minutes. I'm going to invite us to take a shoulder roll or two, maybe a slow neck roll. Move with intuition, move without overthinking, just move how your body would like to move, and notice sensations in your body as you do so. And then whenever you're ready, take a soft gaze or blink your eyes shut and turn your awareness toward your body with some curiosity, with some reverence, and notice how your body is feeling at this moment in your day. Maybe there's parts of your body that are getting your attention. Maybe there is a sense of expansion or a sense of tightness. And we're never just one thing, but I'm going to invite you to attach a word to how your body is feeling, maybe something that's taking up more space or bubbling up to the surface. Just as a way of acknowledging we're bringing our bodies into this shared space, this shared time. On your inhale, fill your lungs up a little bit more than usual. Exhale really slowly. And when you reach the bottom of your exhale, come on back to the surface, blink your eyes open. And I'm going to invite us to come off of mute to share our one word check-in, to introduce our voice into the community. All right. So I'm feeling grounded this morning. Jessie, how about you?
Cold, a little cold.
Thank you. And I will acknowledge it's not the morning, it is the afternoon for anyone who's keeping score.
One of those days too.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Yin Shun, how are you feeling?
Excited.
Wonderful. Callie?
Tense. I felt the muscles.
Thank you. Cindy, how are you today?
Nourished.
Say it again. Sorry, I missed it.
Nourished.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So Sutarita.
Dissipating.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Warm.
Okay. You and Jessie can get together. Connor, how are you feeling?
A little lethargic today.
Okay. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And then before I turn it over to Shun to really jump in, let's just do a little bit of conscious breathing. The breath is always such a beautiful tool to come back home to our bodies, to anchor us in our bodies so we can continue to do this inclusivity work in an embodied way. Okay. So again, you can take movement on your way to stillness if that's helpful. I always invite folks to move kind of how a toddler or a pet wakes up from a nap, just kind of without overthinking it. Joint rolls are always really, really lovely. Sometimes if I'm going to open up my pathway, I notice where my two sitting bones are underneath me and equally distribute my weight across my two sitting bones. And then whenever you're ready for that sense of stillness, stack your shoulders over your hips. You can blink your eyes shut or take that soft gaze. And then on an inhale, reach the crown of your head up toward the ceiling. On an exhale, gently ground down through your sitting bones and through the soles of your feet. Turn your gaze inward. Notice how your body is feeling. Notice that you're breathing. No need to alter your breath at all. Step behind your breath and observe it. Notice your body expanding and releasing, the ebb and the flow of your particular breath. and our minds will wander. That's totally natural. Simply notice and invite your awareness back to your breath. And I'll lead us through some square breathing. Let's meet at the bottom of an exhale. Inhale with me. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Hold. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Hold. Return to your normal breath. Notice how your torso is feeling on that release. Continue to put your morning down. We can pick it up later. Allow your breath to invite you deeper into this time, this space. On your next inhale, fill your lungs all the way up. Exhale really slowly. And when you reach the bottom of your exhale, blink your eyes back open. Come back to the breath. Okay. Thank you for breathing with me. Yin Shun, let's go. Let's get started.
Fabulous. Thank you. All right, I'm going to share my screen so you all can see what we're working with here. Okay. You all are my very first faith-based group to work with. I've delivered these workshops to everybody from major multinational video game studios to small nonprofits, and it's so exciting for me to be here to work with you. I can't wait to get to know you and to spend some time, figuring out what you need, and just getting to know your congregations and your groups through what you're doing. Okay.
And
This
before
is
you jump in, I'm just
Yeah.
going to say, I'm going to be managing the chat the whole time. So
Yeah.
I'll be kind of taking notes there for folks that helps deepen the learning. And I'm also going to be fielding questions and comments. So please use that as a way to engage while Yin Shun is presenting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge on the chat, so do be sure to use it if that's where you're comfortable. You do not have to have your cameras on. We will be doing some deep internal work this time around, so feel free to turn them off if you like. This is a two-part workshop, as you all know. Week 1, I've titled Inside Out, because we're going to be looking at our internal machinations and how we can use those to build better communities, which we'll take a closer look at in week 2, which is called Outside In. Okay. The general idea here is that if we don't know ourselves, then we're going to have a hard time being good leaders for our communities. And better than that, if we do know ourselves, we're going to have a really good time grounding our communities in what it is that we feel like our values are. Okay. So as you're going through this week's program, have a think about how you might use your knowledge of self to put to work in your communities moving forward, right? How can we apply what we've learned this time around to our communities, and what does that cross application of knowledge look like? Okay. All right. See here. Whoops, that's not what I want to do. Okay, so if you all could use the chat box and tell us what it is you'd like to get out of our time together. Spend some time with that. I'll give you a couple minutes for that. And this can be anything, okay? It can be anything like, a small thing, right? Or it can be something that's really, really macro. It can be something like, I would like to get to know where my values are, where they came from. Or it can be something really huge, like I want my community to feel totally included, right? Okay, so feel free to be really broad in that thinking. I'll give you guys a minute to do that, and then we'll dive right in. And also, if you think of things while we're moving on through this program, feel free to drop them in at any time and we'll log those in, okay? Good. Okay, strong.
Stronger inclusivity practices to use in the classroom and with congregational teams.
Great. Okay. More likely to get to that next week, but we'll start on that this week for sure. Okay, so let's start there and we'll figure out where to go from there. Okay, so I like to start every session with some ground rules. I find it really useful to start with some base definitions and to start with some agreement of terms, okay? These are up here so that we can discuss them. And so if you all disagree with them or if you have questions about them, please feel free to jump in and let us know. The first one is that we will be mindful of psychological safety. This is a term that's defined by Amy Edmondson. And the general idea is that in any psychologically safe team or community or congregation, what it means is that we have some sense of, yes, absolutely, we can share the slides, no question about it. The idea being psychological safety is that we can find a place in our teams, in our congregations, in our communities where everybody feels free to be themselves. That means bringing all of ourselves, whether it be our backgrounds or our education levels or our cultures into the community, but it also means feeling free to make mistakes, all right? It also means being in an environment where everybody feels free to say, I don't know, or can you help me? These are critical parts of any community, okay? When we say that we'll practice, assume, and engage it always, we say that because we're in a situation where this isn't always welcome. It's not always easy to say, I don't know, right? We've built up our society, this Western society, where we don't always feel safe, feeling like we can admit to ourselves that we don't actually know how to do a thing, or worse, that we can admit to somebody who's in our community, or that we can admit to somebody who's our superior, okay? So it's a thing that we always have to practice. It does not come naturally to us in our society. So let's keep on making sure that we understand that we can even make mistakes in this direction, but still come back from that and still practice this, okay? The second point about diversity not just being about visible demographic markers is kind of a big one for me. We often think about racism as being the number one demographic marker, right? It's the easiest thing to target, but there are also things like disability. There are also things like educational level. There are also things like neurodiversity. There are things like our economic backgrounds or our religious backgrounds that we just can't see. Okay, we can't target somebody based on that demographic. All right. So when we think about diversity, have a think about the fact that it includes all kinds of things that are not just skin surface, as it were. Okay. This last one is from a social psychologist named Carol Dweck. Growth mindset effectively says that nobody's born an expert, and that everybody's on a journey, right? Okay. And another way of looking at growth mindset is that we don't want to make a mastery of anything. We want to be sure that we can say to ourselves, actually, I have more to learn about this, right? In another life, I'm a writer, okay? I wasn't born or put on this earth being a great writer. In fact, I would say that I'm probably still learning, right? I'm middling, right? All of us here have things that we're still working on, right? Even if we are at the top of the food chain, as it were, in our communities, we still have things that we can learn from people, and we still have other aspects of our lives that we can actually like pick up and kind of learn from, right? So I think what we want to do is bask in the wonder of the things that we don't know yet, right? We want to ask ourselves, what don't we know yet? And then go from there. That's a key part of growth mindset that I think that we need to embrace a little bit further, okay? Psychological safety, by the way, is a term that was coined by Amy Edmondson, who is a wonderful psychologist, and I will be handing you a research sheet a little bit later on with the resources on it, so you can go ahead and dive into them later on if you like, all right? Okay. Some more grind rules. Our immunities do not make us immune to bias. What does this mean? Okay, I present as an East Asian woman. I am an East Asian woman, right? But that doesn't mean that I didn't have terrible moments in my past where I made snap judgments on people based on what I didn't know about them, all right? So for instance, one memory that's really, really hard for me to remember, but I'll share it with you now. 2 doors down the street from me when I was a kid was a girl named Trinity. And she and her family were among the only Black people in my neighborhood. I grew up in a very white neighborhood. One day she and our friend Kristen came to ask me to play. I was really stressed because I had been told I categorically could not play that day. It was not okay for me to go out to play. And I was kind of on this strange sort of, I don't know, just really stressed out playing. And Trinity asked me, can you come and lay out in the sun for 15 minutes? And I said, no, I can't. What do you want me to do? Do you want my skin to turn out looking like yours? It was a terrible circumstance. I felt awful about it. Okay. Now, some people might look at me and be like, oh, but you're Asian. How could you possibly, say such a racist thing? How could that come out of your mouth? Well, it's because I didn't grow up with Black people in my community, right? I wasn't taught that way. I wasn't taught that other people's skin tones are frankly, A, none of my business, and B, it's okay to be whatever skin tone you are, right? These are things that I did not know about myself, okay? I know a lot of LGBTQIA people who fall on the more conservative side of the spectrum. When I speak to my left-wing friends about this, they tend to be a little shocked. How is it possible that LGBTQIA people could be conservative? Well, we all know that's just because you're one thing, it doesn't mean you're another thing, right? And this speaks to the aspect of intersectionality, which is a phrase coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. The idea that we are none of us a monolith. We comprise multitudes, right? There are lots of different ideas that we can bandy around and that we can hold within ourselves, okay? The second point is one of my favorites. Diversity and inclusivity are hard, but good, right? Okay. What does that mean? It means that when we get told that we did something wrong, we can't just lie down and say it's over. Okay, I'm not going to try this again. Okay, it means that we have to get up again and we have to try again. Okay, the goodness of something is not a question so much of where is your moral compass at. It's a question of what's best for our community and what's best for ourselves. Okay, and then this last point, celebrating curiosity and intellectual humility. Intellectual humility is a phrase that was coined by Angela Duckworth, who's done a lot of work on grit. Intellectual humility essentially answers the question, what don't I know, right? What do I know that I don't know? Okay. So this idea of respectful curiosity, again, harkening back to growth mindset, is a thing that I like to kind of hammer home over and over again. Again, these are things we have to remind ourselves of because these are not things that are rewarded in our society. Okay. We don't necessarily get told that it's okay to not know a thing or to want to be curious about a thing, right? We've all seen the child in the grocery store who asks why that person is in a wheelchair, okay, or why that person's skin is so black, or mommy, why that person's eyes so small. And what does mommy do? Mommy goes, oh, shh, we don't ask about that kind of thing. We don't ask about that kind of thing, okay, which then puts things in a position of shame. Okay, and that's not where we want to be, right? We want respectful curiosity, okay? Okay, so I've thrown a lot at you these first few minutes, and I want to ask you, do you all have questions about any of these concepts that I can answer for you, or things you want to discuss, or things that you don't agree with? That's okay too. I'll flip backwards here to this to the first slide here. Any questions about these or disagreements? And here's slide 2. I feel like I'm at the eye doctor. Is it better 1 or 2? 1 or 2? Okay, great. Okay, Kelly and Rebecca, I have clocked your questions, and we will definitely address these a little later on in our workshop together. Okay. All right, great. Thank you so much, everybody, for that. Okay, can I say a little bit more about what neurodiversity encompasses? Yes, this can be anything from autism, right, to depression. It can be anything from what is the word for when letters get flipped around on you? Dyslexia, right? Okay, it can something from dyslexia, right? Or it can be ADHD, right? So it can be anything that that sets your methodology of learning or your methodology of processing outside of what we term as a norm. Okay, and that's a really good question, because there is a lot of discussion around this idea of what is neurotypical. Right? What is neuroatypical? We don't know. I mean, the reality is that I'm 48. 48? Am I 49? I don't know. Okay. Anyway, somewhere I'm in my late 40s. All right. And we are in the situation where when I was a teenager, I'm pretty sure that parts of my behavior may have been termed as being, as being ADHD oriented. Right. So there are lots of things that we don't know yet, which is why I kind of try to stay away from the terms neurotypical and neuroatypical, but you will hear them bandied about. Okay. All right, great. Okay, terrific. Thank you very much for that question. Much appreciated. Oops, back up. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is hear from you, either in the chat or out loud. Why do you think you need inclusivity in your congregations? We talk about these things as if they're a foregone conclusion. Yes, we need these things, but I think a lot of times we don't actually drill down to brass tacks about why we think we need them. Any thoughts on that? Why do we want inclusivity in our organizations and congregations?
I found that for Christian congregations, like it goes to the heart of our theology as being like one body in Christ. This idea that the diversity of peoples that come together to make up the church, and if the church or congregations, school, classrooms, whatnot, aren't a welcoming, inclusive place, that really goes against the, the very core of why we're doing what we're doing.
Okay, cool. All right. What do you think being more inclusive does for the congregation outside of it being kind of a moral tenet of what you're actually doing? Good answers here. Okay, people we serve feel safe. Great. Okay, to make everybody feel welcome and include everybody's perspectives for richness. I love that. Sucharita, can you say a little bit more about that? What do you think it means to include everybody's perspectives for richness? What does for richness mean?
Probably being too kind of concise there. I meant that it adds to the conversation to have everybody included.
Good. Yeah, absolutely. And the corollary to that too is that when marginalized people or people who aren't necessarily represented in our core demographic see their concerns or to see themselves represented, then they can see themselves better contributing, right? So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg scenario. Okay. At the end of the day, I think what we're after is giving people agency, giving people the sense that they can not only participate, but that they can contribute to what we see as Christianity, right? That we can actually build a better society with everybody's points of view represented. That's great. Thank you, Sucharita. Terrific. To defeat the us versus them mindset. Okay, Cindy, can you say a little bit more about that? What's wrong with the us versus them mindset? Tell me more.
I was looking at your question and what do you think? And then what do you think the people in your congregation want? So I think I want to defeat the us versus them mindset, meaning we often, especially in Catholic circles, we tend to go on these like mission trips and think, oh, we're going to go and help these people. They're less fortunate. We really need to help them. And whereas I'm thinking, oh, actually, we're just going to go and try to defeat this us versus them. We're all human, kind of. How can we build a connection and see that we're actually all human? But then when I see your other question, why do you think the people in your congregation want inclusivity? Specifically right now, I think the people in my congregation want inclusivity because they think that that's what Jesus is calling us to do, not necessarily for the us versus them mindset.
Okay. Do you think it's worth drilling down with them what that means, that Jesus wants them to do that? Or maybe more to the point, do you think it's worth having the conversation with them about what that means, right? What that phrase means, that this is what Jesus wants?
I'm not sure. I think that there's a big hierarchy at play when you ask the first thing that comes to mind is that. So I'm not sure if I'm the one that has to drill that, whereas I'm the one kind of sitting down being drilled at.
Okay, good. All right, terrific. No, that's great. There are no wrong answers here. The idea is to get ourselves, thinking in this direction and talking in this direction. So that's terrific. Yeah, good. Thank you for that. I have thoughts that I will come back to you a little bit later on. Okay. All right. That is terrific, friends. Okay. So I'm just going to ask you to take 1 minute here and write a description of the person that you speak to. Okay. And the guiding questions here are meant to help you, right? Who's your ideal community member? What is their education level? What is their involvement in community matters, excuse me. And Ellie, if you can set the timer for a minute, and we'll just give people a minute to work on this. Okay. Ready? And go. Elle, if you give us a 15-second countdown. Okay, thanks.
Fifteen seconds. There's a minute.
Right, terrific. Okay, do nothing with that. Set it aside, put it in your pocket for now. We'll come back to it later on, all right? Okay, thank you. Okay, so another exercise. I'm going to set the timer for 2 minutes, and I would like you to spend a couple minutes on a character sketch or description of yourself, okay? Demographic markers being things like your race, potentially, right? What religion you practice, for instance, some of your beliefs and opinions, and you can write these in first person or third person, okay? 2 minutes for this exercise, Ellie. Thank
Got it.
you.
Thirty seconds. There's 2 minutes.
Great. Okay, how was that for people? Good. Okay. All right. What does the thumbs up mean, Rebecca?
Flowed easily.
Oh, good. Okay, terrific. All right. Anybody have a difficult time with this or anything like that? What kinds of things did you find yourself calling out about yourself?
I was maybe a little embarrassed about this, but a lot of the qualities that I put down for your first question on like, who do I want to see in an ideal
Okay.
congregation member, I like also put down for myself or realized like, oh, there's a lot of overlap between these two.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it was like education level, you know, sort of your engagement with your community. Say more.
Yeah, being engaged, like a good listener.
Okay,
You know, that kind of thing.
cool. All right, good. Okay, Sucharita, race, gender, sexuality, profession. Okay, great, terrific. What made you choose those things?
I don't know, they were just on my mind.
Okay, good. All right, terrific. Anybody else want to weigh in before we move to the next thing? Okay. Okay, I'm going to show you a bio that I wrote for myself. Okay, I'm a cisgendered, able-bodied East Asian woman. I come from money and have advanced degrees. I like people in general and I overthink things. I was raised Republican and capitalist. I like sport I can participate in, and I am a dog person. Okay, was there anything here that surprised you about the things I've chosen to identify myself with? Why do you think I chose these particular demographic markers?
I think it's really interesting that you identified that you were raised Republican and capitalist, and it asks the question, how are you living right now? And I think it honors how important it is, the water that we were swimming in before our brains were fully formed.
Absolutely. So that actually also leads into the question of who do you think I've written this description for? Any ideas around that? Wild guesses, wrong answers, completely welcome. Okay, so I actually had to think about this a lot. And I've deliberately chosen these demographic markers because they're things that I have to remind myself of. This is a description for me. Okay. I lived in New York City for a decade. And before that, I lived in suburban California where I live now. And I believed that public transit was for poor people. Okay. That's the Republican capitalist part of me. All right. That's the part of me that grew up. Okay. I have to remind myself that I come from money and that I have advanced degrees, because these are the things that kind of form my background, right? I'm a writer for a living. I don't know that I could have taken the creative risks that I do if I didn't have financial backing on a regular basis. Okay. Did I write it in 2 minutes? No. Call to the carpet. Thank you very much. But yeah, it's a thing that I had to think about, right? On because I had to remind myself, because if somebody were to ask me, oh, write something about yourself, I would be like, oh, here's my bio, right? And then just give it to them. But this wouldn't get into any of the stuff that not that people necessarily need to know about me, but that I have to remind myself of on a regular basis. Okay. Let's see, Cindy, I want to get your question. Can you expand on a little bit more? You said work opportunities in white spaces. Tell me more.
I have 2 advanced degrees.
Yeah.
I was raised Republican capitalist and like sport and can participate in. And I was like, oh, this is like a good power move to show
little
like
bit.
I have power.
Yeah,
They're not going to push me around kind of vibe.
There
I'm
is
gonna
some of that
fit
too.
in with the culture.
Absolutely. There's absolutely some of that, right? So this question of like, who was it written for? This is another thing, right? Like, who am I actually positing? Who am I posturing to? What am I doing when I write these things out, right? But in large part, yeah, these are things that I had to remind myself of. Okay. And the reason is because of the little thing that we call ordinary bias or ordinary privilege. Okay, this is drawn from a woman named Peggy McIntosh, who wrote a remarkable piece in 1989, still relevant today, called "The Invisible Knapsack." Okay, and also I'm going to send you guys a copy of this. But the idea is that the parts of your identity that you think about the least are your ordinary privilege. Okay, so these are the things that you carry around with you that other people may not have, right? So the fact that I'm cisgendered, for instance, that's the thing I never think about. Okay, or the fact that I'm able-bodied, I never think about it, right? Until the day that I put my back out and like had problems putting on pants. Okay, I mean it was a bad situation, right? But I didn't think about that until that actually happened to me, right? The fact that I have financial backing, I don't think about that on a regular basis, right? But I should, because it's a thing that gives me ordinary privilege. Okay, does that make sense? Sucharita, I see you've got eyebrows on. I don't know if those are good eyebrows or questioning eyebrows. Okay, all right, they're okay, but they're ordinary eyebrows. Okay, all right, that's fine. Okay, great, terrific. Okay, so
well, can I just say, even down to the dog person, like that made me realize I like situate myself outside of, like, to me, what's implied is dog person versus cat person. And I'm just like, I'm neither. I'm outside of that like societal binary.
Yeah.
And also like how savvy that is to be like, here's some, as Cindy's point, like here's some power plays, and writers do this. I'm going to soften it with a cute detail about myself to make sure you remember that I'm human too.
Exactly. That's exactly it, right? So in part, this is written for me, and in part, it's written for somebody else, right? For an external audience. Okay, so just think about the things that you choose to call about yourself. And some of this also, this harkens back to this idea of the things that we don't necessarily think about, right? And so these are some of the ordinary privileges that we may not consider, right? Can I get a credit card with no problem? Is it a sure fact that everybody around me is going to be happy with me when they see me, right? We don't know that. Do I have to think about the fact, like, I mean, every single time there's a mass shooting somewhere, my first question is, oh my gosh, please don't let it be an East Asian guy. That's a terrible thing to think. It's a terrible thing to think. I don't want to be that person that thinks that, right? But yet at the same time, this is the burden that I walk around with wearing this face that I do, right? Okay. Black kids wear it all the time, right? I mean, where it's like when something terrible happens, then they want to know that it's not a member of their community that did this terrible thing, right? Okay. So yeah, ordinary privileges. Okay. Okay, let's see, where are we now? Okay, so did we already do this?
However, Yin Shun, like, I will just say, like, when there's a shooting and it's somebody who's white, I don't have that same fear. And it's someone who's white quite often, right?
Good point. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's another type of ordinary privilege, right? You know, not being able, not having to consider whether or not something has racial overtones to it, right? Or ableist overtones to it. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, thanks for that addition. Really useful. Okay, and then here's just another couple of things, right? Within our communities, remember we talked about bringing what we know about ourselves to the outside, right? When we look at our communities, we want to make sure that our congregations actually reflect the people that we want to come in. We want to come into our communities, right? We want to make sure that folks who might be considering joining our congregation or our community feel comfortable in our congregation or community because there are other people like them who are on board, right? This cruise line that I went with my parents on is Viking, and all of their materials are white people. All of their marketing materials are white people, and I find that really, really bizarre because there were 190 people on this boat, and like 80 of them were East Asian extraction. And it was like, where are the East Asian people? Like, oh, I'm so confused, right? Or, oh my goodness, like most of the people on these Viking cruises are like 85 years old, okay, and like all the people on the marketing demographics are like 65, right? So it's just there's no accurate representation of the community, right? And that's the other thing we look at is like, how accurately are we representing our community at the end of the day? How accurately are we serving them? Okay, so things we think about. All right, good. Okay, questions about that? Thoughts? Random brain farts. Okay, good. Okay, all right, so what I want to embark on now is a fun little exercise. I drew this from Amy E. Herman, who is a wonderful, wonderful woman who's worked with everybody from the FBI to OR nurses, and her entire job is to help us to dig deeper on ourselves by way of visual art. Okay, and you'll see what I mean here in a second. But the question that she asks on a regular basis is, how does who I am and where I'm from affect what I believe and the formulation of my opinions? Okay. So what we're going to do next is an exercise in which we take a look at a piece of art. And we're going to write a quick description of the woman in the picture. Okay, we're going to give you a minute for this. All right. It's a very short exercise. Okay, you ready? Here we go. So you're describing the woman and maybe her setting too, if you like.
$15. That's a minute.
Okay, terrific. All right, does somebody want to share what they thought of this painting? What do you think is happening here? No right answers. Okay, so my personal inclination, okay, great, terrific. Pensive and contemplative were two words that came to my mind. All right, yeah, I had that too, absolutely. I also prescribed to her that she's lonely and that she's a little bit disheveled. Look, she's only got the one glove on, right? Okay. She looks frustrated. Okay, good, Jesse. All right, terrific. Okay, anybody else? Mother who's taking a moment to enjoy a warm cup of coffee, forgot her book at home. Wow, Cindy. You have been there. You've been there. Yes. Okay. All right. Terrific. Great. That is a perfect place for me to say that everything that we see and everything that we intake is often affected by who we are and the experiences we've had in the past. Okay. And the questions that Amy Herman asks her students to undergo are, when I look at something, am I being influenced by my own experiences or the experiences of those close to me? My geographic history, affinity, or present location, my values, morals, cultures, or religious beliefs, my upbringing or education, and she goes on. Okay, I mean, there's like a ton of things that we have to consider just when we look at something, all right? This is totally normal, okay? You might think to yourself, oh, this feels a little bit like prejudice, right? When we look at somebody and we immediately prescribe to them a thing in our brain, you know what? It's okay. Our brains process 11 million pieces of information a day. If we didn't have these convenient buckets to dump things in, we would be completely bananas all the time, all right? The reason our brains work the way they do is because they want to save us from going bananas. All right. So once we have an experience with someone or something or some place, our brains kind of lock that into a little bucket so that the next time we have an experience with someone, something, or some place that looks remotely like that thing, then our brains can save us a little bit of processing power. Okay. All of which is to say it's okay, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't question it. Right. Again, what don't we know? Right. What don't we know about this? Right. Every single person has a totally different experience to share with us, right? And every single person deserves the space that our questioning ourselves can give to them, all right? Does it mean we have to work a little bit harder? 100%. But does it mean that we gain that much more of a knowledge about our humankind and our fellow humans? Absolutely, 100%, right? Okay. So Jesse, you mentioned that she looked frustrated. Tell me more about that. What do you think about this woman makes her frustrated?
I read into the downward pass, like the way her eyes looking down,
Yeah.
so the redness of her cheeks, maybe like
Okay.
flustered or frustrated.
Yeah, I love the way that you put that you read into it, right? Because this is a thing that we do, right? We tend to prescribe our own experiences. I said that she was depressed and disheveled, right? Okay, when really we don't actually know that about her. We know that her eyes are downcast. We know that she is wearing a yellow hat and a green coat. We know that she looks like what might be in an empty diner, but for all we know, it could be a Hollywood set. Okay, we don't know anything about her, right? The point is, it's totally possible to be specific without being accurate, right? Okay, so those are two very different things that we have to consider, okay? It's entirely possible to say that someone is a Black man without actually prescribing any other types of value judgments on that type of thing, right? Is it hard for us to do so? Yes, but you know what? Hard is good, right? Okay, so we need to push ourselves constantly in the direction of saying not necessarily peanut butter and jelly, okay, Asian woman and accent, right? Okay, or Black man and violence, okay, or blue means little boy, okay. Is it harder for us to stretch away from that and say peanut butter and chocolate chip instead? To say East Asian woman and terrible at math, right here, okay? To say, Black man and the gentlest person you've ever met on the planet? 100%. Is it harder for us to do so? Yeah. Is it good for us to do so? Yes. Okay. It's good for us and it's good for our communities. Okay. We need to model that kind of leadership on a regular basis. All right. Okay, good. I think this is where I get to turn it over to Ellie.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to invite us to stand up. You can turn your camera off if you'd like. We're going to move our body just for a few moments, and then we'll do a collective breathing exercise. Okay, so I'm just going to show you two different shapes, and we're going to move between the two shapes. So the first, you're going to have your feet out nice and wide. Big toes are going to face out. Bend into your knees and bring your hands to heart center. This is called goddess pose in yoga, and you can kind of just like get side to side and do some rocking. You could go lower and do some bouncing, or you could embrace stillness in this shape. Okay, this is one. And then the next one is called star. You're going to push down, fingertips high, eyes up to the sky, fingertips wide, get as tall as you can, and then drop back down to goddess. You can rock side to side, rock up and down, or embrace stillness. Get on into those hips. And then press down to lift up to star. Fingertips wide, eyes up to the sky. One more time, drop into goddess. Breathe really well here. Notice your body, work out some kinks. Ooh. Press down to lift up, fingertips high, eyes high, chest wide, big breath in. And then let that go. Ooh, shake that out. Get a little bit unstuck. Take any other joint rolls or any other movement you'd like on your way back. Okay, and in terms of doing some of this work in community, It's always important to check in. We're starting from the inside out. How are we doing with our bodies? And it's really powerful to have our bodies be in community together. So when we can sync our bodies in community, it's going to be really powerful. So I'm just going to lead us through some humming. You can stay on mute if you'd like. You'll be able to hear me. We're going to do 3 inhales, and I'm going to invite you to hum your exhale. Okay, you can place a hand on your heart or a hand on your throat. It can feel really supportive to feel that resonance in your body. If you prefer to stand up and sway or bring a sway to your seated position on your hum, that can be really soothing as well. So you're going to find your voice, your resonance, and offer your note out into the universe. And our humming together will soothe our bodies and create healing within community. Okay, so take a shoulder roll or 2, a neck roll. Choose whether you want to do this standing or seated, and really open up your pathways. Shut down your eyes. And we'll take a full breath in and then hum your exhale. Inhale. Hum your exhale. Last one, inhale. And hum. Release to a normal breath. Notice sensation in your torso. Blink your eyes back open. Okay. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thanks, everybody. I love that exercise. It's one of those things that we don't always take time for, so I'm super grateful we did. Okay, this next exercise is really hard. I'm going to do it with you. I learned something new about myself every single time. We're going to take 3 minutes for this one. It's a longer exercise. Okay. I'm going to ask you to make a list of some demographics, and then I'm going to ask you to write down 5 stereotypes for each of these demographics. All right. I cannot stress this enough. All right. Do not pause, censor, or correct yourself. Okay. We're not sharing these with each other. All right. But it's important that we do this for reasons that I will outline a little later on. Okay. Okay, Ellie, 3-minute timer. Go ahead.
30 seconds. That's time. Yushin, I can't hear you.
That's maybe because I've turned off my toggle switch. Okay.
you go.
Hi.
Hi,
3
you're
years
back
of
again.
this.
You're
3 years
back.
of this. You think we know what we're doing? Okay. So what I was saying to myself is that's really hard for me. It's hard for me every time I do this. How was it for all of you? Okay. Rebecca looks stressed. Or am I prescribing to you? I might be projecting.
No, you're not projecting.
Okay.
Wasn't good.
Yeah, me neither. Okay, yeah, it wasn't good for me either. It was awkward. Okay, Jesse, say more about awkwardness. Awkward in which direction?
Awkward or maybe embarrassing, kind of shameful towards myself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm watching Grey's Anatomy for the first time ever, which has a number of queer people in it, right? And they are typically queer people of color, but for some reason I decided that LGBTQI people are all white people in my brain. Like, how? I mean, but like, if I look at my overall demographic of friends, like I have a number of queer people in my life, and like almost none of them are white people. Like, why? Where did I get this idea? And that's the thing that I want us to explore with this terrible exercise, right? I mean, does what you put down surprise you? Where did it come from, right? Where do you think you learned these stereotypes? These are the things that we're really getting at for me here, right? And if you look at the things that we chose to call out about ourselves in our bios that we wrote about ourselves, right? And for instance, the fact that I was raised Republican and capitalist probably has a lot to do with some of the things that I came up with, right? I mean, if my indigenous friends knew what I was writing down here, the things that I still cannot get over, regardless of how many books by Native Americans I read or how much time I spend around that demographic, like, I mean, they would be horrified, But I like to think that there's room for improvement on a regular basis. There is always room for us to surmount some of these things that come up in us over and over and over again, right? I think for a long time, as an East Asian woman, I thought I could be white. That's the part of my life where it was like, oh, you can assimilate, you have to assimilate, right? That kind of thing. And so I think for a long time, I onboarded a lot of these ideas that make no sense because I didn't have any experience with any of these folks, right? But I think the question I want to ask you is, where do you think you learned some of these stereotypes? Like, I mean, do you have ideas about where these things may have come from, like I do? I mean, or have you thought about it at all? Tell me a little bit more about where you think these things came from.
Movies or commercials?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Okay, speaking of which, do you all, that idea that we have, that castles have moats? Okay, what's in a moat usually, if you think about it? Just water, usually, right? Are there animals living in that water? What animals are they?
Frogs, fishes.
Okay, crocodiles, maybe? Do you usually think of crocodiles in those moats? Okay, I have it on very good authority. First of all, where on earth would we find crocodiles in like Germany? Okay, because that's where most of these moats are. Okay, like, I mean, wait. Okay, so crocodiles, no. It turns out that these moats were not only dry, but they had bears in them. Okay, and they were also used as hunting grounds for very wealthy princes and bishops to just like shoot random animals so that they could feel like hunting people. All right, so it's like, but where did we get this idea? We got this idea because we were watching Disney movies, and Disney decided that moats should have water in them and that the water should have alligators and frogs and crocodiles in them. So weird, right? Okay, so yeah, you're absolutely right. Movies, you know, these things that we just came up with, it's not, we didn't come up with them from nowhere. We came up with them because somewhere we got the idea that peanut butter goes with jelly, right? That girls should wear pink, that Native Americans all live on reservations and they're stuck in this weird time warp, right? Where all they do is sit around talking about, I don't know, old cars all day. Okay, like that's not a thing. That's not real life, right? You know, so it behooves us to not only know where these stereotypes come from, but also to fight against them on a regular basis. Okay, the name for what we're talking about, by the way, is cultural smog. It's a very convenient way to think about these things that kind of like populate our lives, right? You cannot escape it. It is impossible for us to escape cultural smog, but it is possible for us to blow a little fresh air into it. Okay, all right, cool. Okay, so we're gonna go on to this there's a lot of text on this slide, okay? But essentially, this is exactly what we've been talking about, right? Jesse, early on, when you imagined the demographic that you're speaking to, right? You said it looked a lot like you, okay, right? And a lot of that comes from what we think of as the unmarked state, or what we call the unmarked state, okay? So this is the thing that we think of where when we imagine a detective or when we imagine a professor, this idea pops up in our head, right? With the detective, it's always Humphrey Bogart. It's always some guy in a trench coat with a cigar. Oh, you know, walked into my office and a dame was in there, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And the dame always has fishnets on. Always she has fishnets on. Okay. Always it's Marlene Dietrich. All right. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, how do we get out of this unmarked state? Okay, how do we get out of the idea that we have a singular type of person that we're serving, right? Or that we have a singular type of person that we should be including in our congregation? Okay, how do we get away from the idea that that there is an ideal demographic for anything? Okay, so what we want to get away from is this concept that there is an ideal in one way, shape, or form. Okay, we want to get away from that. All right, and we want to start thinking about whether or not we can expand our minds. Like when we think of a professor, we want to be able to ask ourselves, what skin color is this professor, right? Are they an able-bodied person? Are they always wearing the tweed jacket with the elbow patches on, right? Do they have, like, my idea of a professor always has mutton chops on? I don't know why. That makes no sense at all. Okay, it's totally not modern, right? So these are the things we want to get away from. Okay, want to get away from the default state or the unmarked state. Okay. Okay, so this is where we revisit the idea of the ideal congregation member, okay? If your ideal congregation member is defaulting to a default state, right? If they have a singular type of educational level, or if they have a singular type of skin color, right? Or if they are able-bodied, you wanna ask yourself, why? How do we get to that point where there is this singular type of demographic member, okay? Consider that, all right? Okay, all right, we have exercises for you. Okay, so this next exercise is where we're going to do a little imagination. So it'll be a 2-minute exercise. We're not going to write the character sketch or description. Just imagine somebody who shares the same demographic marker. Okay, so for me, it would be an East Asian woman who has multiple degrees and who, you know, comes from money. Okay, and then we're going to put this character into a sticky situation and we're going to write them out of it. All right, we're going to take 2 minutes out of it. And here's what I mean by sticky situation. Okay, your character is face to face with a serious phobia, or they get evicted, they witness a crime. I love this one. They finally meet their hero and they're a jerk, right? What do they do? Okay, write them out of it. All right, so we'll take 2 minutes for this exercise and we'll go on from there.
15. That's 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're gonna quick change, take that same sticky situation. And we're now going to imagine somebody who is one major different demographic marker from me. Okay, so for instance, for me, I might choose somebody who grew up in a different economic set. I might choose somebody who is disabled. I might choose somebody who's a different skin color or a different ethnicity. All right, and then you're going to put them in the same sticky situation you used before and write about what happens next. We'll give you another 2 minutes. Okay, ready? Go.
$15. There's 2 minutes.
Great. Okay. How was that for folks? Okay. Cindy's giving me a okay. For me, I chose being evicted. And I quickly realized that I have no idea what I would do. It was strange because I immediately snowballed into the whole like, well, with no fixed abode, I can't get a bank account or I can't apply for a job. I can't get benefits. I can't do any of these things. But I didn't know what happened in between the being evicted and having no fixed abode, right? And I think for me, what this brings up is I wonder who I would go to get that information. Like, who would I talk to find out what it was like for somebody in that situation? And I think the thing this brings up for me the most is at the end of the day, not only do I not have anybody in my social network that I can ask about this, but whether or not it's okay for me to ask somebody about this question. Like, is it okay for me to approach somebody and say, hey, I have these questions about your experience. Is that all right? Right. And I'll turn the question to you. What do you all think? Is it okay for us to ask somebody who has a different demographic marker than we do about their experience? What do we think about that?
I hope it's okay because I've been doing it all the time. But
That's fantastic. But what is that experience like though for you?
yeah, I think it gets easier every time you do it. Like the first time I asked someone like specifically, hey, in your culture, so we're in a school setting here and there's people coming from all over the world. And so, the first time I asked someone, hey, in Brazil, do they do this? It's like, am I allowed to, assume that it's going to be different? And then you realize from that conversation, it gets a little bit easier. But yeah, I think it's case by case basis. Yeah.
I love that you said that like it's a muscle, isn't that needs to be exercised, because it does feel weird the first time you say it. do you think, is there anything in that that's related to sort of admitting ignorance for you? I mean, do you feel that at all, or is that a normal thing for you?
Yeah, I think there's it's been learning to like just, I think like you talked about at the beginning, like it's okay to not know. And it's not like I don't mind not knowing something, but if you're just like in that moment, you like have to pretend like, oh yeah, I don't know this thing. And so I think there's a little moment of that for sure. Yeah.
Have you ever had anybody tell you no, they don't want to answer that question?
Not yet.
Okay,
So,
good.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that tells me that you're building a psychologically safe space, right? It tells me that you have an environment around you where people feel like they can answer the question and not feel like it would do anything to their social standing, right? And that's a really valuable thing. That's fantastic. Good. Okay, terrific. Okay.
Yeah, I was
So
gonna
yeah,
say,
go ahead.
like, I think the shifting to the how and the why, like how are you asking the question and why are you asking the question matters. And that's to me where the embodiment comes in, is like, are folks viewing your body as safe? Like, how are you approaching them with that humility? Why, right? It's a really contextual ethic for me. And so it's like, if I could get more information from my own demographic, and I can do that without asking for like emotional labor of a different group, I'm going to do it. Right. And if it is about, like, if I do feel like I'm in right relationship with the person, or the person has already shown that they're comfortable sharing, like that changes things for me for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what are some other ways that we can gain this access to this knowledge without having to ask somebody to do free emotional labor if we don't have those folks in our demographic?
I mean, I talk about like following folks on social media. Like if someone's publishing something on social media, like they're wanting to share the information.
Yeah.
And that's like, that is a way for me to learn by like really paying attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's 100% right. And that actually segues really handily into our homework for the week. But the month, my gosh, I don't get to see you for another month. Eek. Okay. All right. So over the course of the next month, we haven't talked a lot about disability this time around, but I guarantee you there are folks in your congregation and your community who are disabled. It's 25% of all Americans are disabled. It is the most intersectional of all of our demographic markers, right? That is to say, it cuts across religious lines and ethnic lines and cultural lines, right? And economic lines. So it is a group that is pretty important. This is an exercise I do with myself on a regular basis. When I'm walking my dog, I tend to pay attention to the actual environment around me. I think about how I might experience this if I were disabled in some way, shape, or form. And don't worry, I will send you over these slides, so you're good. Okay, we'll have these for you. And then numbers 2 and 3 speak very, very closely to what Ellie was talking about, right? Reviewing your calendar. Asking yourself who you're making time for. Are they people who are outside of your own demographic, right? Reviewing your social media feeds, right? Who are we listening to or paying attention to? You know, who are we making time for? Who are we giving our brain space to? Okay, this is a pretty important thing. And then the last thing is to be ready to discuss next month, not next week. Next month. Okay. All right. So it's a lot of homework. And I would encourage you, if you all are in touch with each other, to lean on each other for this kind of thing. Okay. You know, I have had to work really hard to make sure that my social media feeds are not covered with people who look like me and who think like me and who care about the same things. And the way that I do that is often by looking at my friends' feeds and seeing who they're following and who they're paying attention to. Okay. So that has helped a lot too. All right. So this is called taking an audit of your life. I do it every once in a while. It is sometimes remarkable for me to look at my calendar and realize that I've made no time for the people who I want to learn more from and be curious about. And if you don't have these folks in your life, then ask to be introduced, right? You know, somebody in your life knows somebody who shows a different demographic marker than you do. Okay. All right, cool. That takes us to the end of week 1, friends.
Thank you so much, Yin Shun and
yeah.
Ellie. We so appreciate your time and your expertise.
Absolutely. If we could hold in the last 2 minutes to ask folks to do their one-word checkout to kind of bookend to end how we began. I'll invite you to drop back into your body and notice how you're feeling. That was a lot. That was a big 75 minutes. Notice how your body's feeling without judgment or story. And I'm going to ask us to come off mute and share that word as well. Okay, I will start. I'm feeling grateful. Yin Shun, how about you?
Really energized.
Jesse.
Stimulated.
Connor.
Reflective.
Mhm. Cindy.
I started off as nourished and now I'm stuffed. I'm ready for my walk.
Love it. Love it. Rebecca.
Oh,
Sucharita.
I'm feeling hopeful too.
Wonderful. Callie.
Energized as well. I like that word.
Mhm. Thank you so much for being here and for the quality of your presence that you brought to our shared space. I really, really appreciate it. And we'll see you hopefully again next month. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Wonderful.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.